Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Australian panel for the MEIEA conference. Today we are talking about the effect that COVID-19 had on the Australian music industry, but also wanting to look at the government support that we are lucky enough to get for our industry. So, you know, everyone knows that across the globe we were hit very hard by COVID-19 pandemic, but the entertainment industry and the music industry was hit the most hard, which is really bad English. So the effect on social distancing, you know, lockdowns had a devastating effect. It's cancelled venues, festivals, events, closed down venues, etc. So it really has shattered the industry. And a lot of the time, also local touring and international touring. And international touring, Millie can talk about. So a few weeks in March, the Australian music industry stopped and, you know, we were in a state of shock. And we knew that we had no idea of what was actually going to happen. So many in the industry were devastated by what had happened. Their careers and lives were just completely stopped. So, however, though, it didn't take long for the industry to kind of innovate and turn around. They really got, they had some resilience. We innovated, we pivoted, turned around in order to survive. So I wanted to talk to these three lovely ladies on the panel today. They all work in different sectors within the Australian music industry, and I wanted to talk to them about how things have changed for them, and also wanted to examine how lucky we are as a country to actually get support from the government. I know a lot of countries out there don't get the support that we've been getting from government. And even though we've got a quite conservative government, we are getting quite a lot of money towards our creative industries, which is really, really great. So Millie and Kate can both talk to that. And I also wanted to just play a quick little video to show what Millie's company, Sounds Australia, is doing. So firstly, I just want to introduce the ladies. Welcome Millie Millgate. She's the executive producer of Sounds Australia, and I'll let her talk about what Sounds Australia does very shortly. And then also Katie Stewart, who is general manager of the Victorian Music Development Office, and I'll let her speak to that in a minute. And then Sarah Guppy, who is COO of Gig Life Pro Asia and director of This Much Talent. So while the ladies are preparing, I'm going to show you a video from what's happening in Sounds Australia.
I can't hear it. Can you hear that? Oh.
In Australia. She's dying to be by your side. Where do I feel most inspired? I think inspiration comes every day in different forms, but I know that I'll always be inspired if I just get outside and go for a walk.
Hi everyone, how are you doing? My name is Emily Woodamara and welcome to Live from Oz. I'm going to be showing you around 3 of my favourite spots around Hobart, and I'm going to be singing some original songs too. Everything will be alright if you let it go. Just do you read it? Are you receiving? Don't you wanna tell me how you feel? Don't you wanna tell me how you feel? So maybe I'll do. So get deluded with you. Yeah, let it fool. So send your steady. It's real.
How amazing.
I've been in Nashville a few times now. The first time I went to Nashville was 2013, and I recorded with now one of my dear friends, but we only just met then, Jakia King, out of Blackbird Studios. Made a record called Blackbird, named it after the studio. I mean, I love Americana and I love country music. It's a place that I look forward to getting back to. As it all fades to black, they don't know the man that I am. The morning.
What is Global Music Match? You are asking that, and I'm going to tell you. What it is, it's a premier event, and I am lucky enough to be one of 12 Australian artists who are joining a total of 96 global artists who will be sharing and connecting along with their 14 export organisations from around the world. Now, this is a very exciting time. It is the first time this has been attempted. Now I'm going to give you something pretty to look at.
So they were just some of the things that Sound Australia have been doing while we've been in this COVID situation. I also want to remind everyone that those of us that are in Victoria, which is myself, Katie and Sarah, are still in lockdown, and we have been in lockdown since August. We can't leave, we can't go away for five kilometres from our house. So, yeah, we're all doing a lot whilst still in lockdown. Anyway, welcome, ladies, Millie, Katie, Sarah. Millie, do you want to have a talk about what we just saw? Because that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me, Chrissie. I do want to acknowledge I'm in Sydney, so I'm a little bit better off than my Melbourne colleagues. I'm coming to you today from the Gadigal lands of the Aurora Nation, and I would like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on this land that I'm on, and I'd also like to acknowledge any Indigenous and First Nations from around the world that are participating in this session as well. So Sounds Australia, as Chrissie mentioned, we were set up as an export body. So we work with Australian artists and industry at multiple showcase conference events. That's the platform where we engage: South by Southwest, The Great Escape, Reeperbahn Festival in Hamburg, a number of the genre-based events, Folk Alliance, Americana, Jazz Ahead, Classical Next. And really we look to provide the best possible environment for our artists to showcase, and we look to create B2B and business opportunities for those artists. In the 10 years that we've existed, we've participated in 80 different international events across 69 different cities in 25 countries. So really and truly our entire work is overseas. So I guess, you know, as soon as COVID happened, it was pretty obvious that that was going to change everything we did. So just to give you a little bit of a scope of those initiatives, it was really about trying to maintain the presence and a profile of sorts for the Australian music industry at the events that were going ahead. And for the most part, a lot of those events that I mentioned gave themselves enough time to convert to a virtual offering. So we wanted to firstly support those events that we were partners to, but also how could we present Australian content still in this way? So I think we dabbled in a number of different ways of doing that. We partnered early on with Tourism Australia and learned very, very quickly that one of the hardest pieces was going to be clearing the copyrights and clearing the licenses that were going to be required. So that was a whole other learning curve. So we looked at presenting some brand new content. We looked at, there's been a lot of, and I think Katie can speak to this because the Victorian government's been just incredible with this kind of support, but there has been a lot of initiatives where artists have been able to produce and record content. So for All That Matters in Asia, we looked at repackaging and repurposing existing footage and presenting that in a showcase form along with a panel. And then we've just looked at other things altogether. And I don't know how much you want me to go into detail into some of those other initiatives, but one of the things we did do is also look at what happened. And I think more than ever, you need to work with your industry and you need to work with those that are already doing things and there was an initiative out of Victoria called Isolate. It was an incredible opportunity for artists to be presented. I think the first week they had 74 artists, all on Instagram, an Instagram festival. This week's going to be the 29th week, which is just frightening to think it's still happening. However, we just felt that this was something that we really believed in, and so early on approached them about financially investing for 6 months to keep them sustainable. So it was a very simple, here's some financial support. We're in a position to do that. You're already doing something clever and innovative, creative and meaningful. We'll get behind that. And we similarly did it with United We Stream. They've been producing opportunities for the dance community around the world. So we partnered with the Electronic Music Conference in Australia to do the same thing there. So I guess it's been a bit of a combination of looking at what's already happening and how can we support it and really bolster that activity, and then what sort of new things should we look at. And one of the things we've really drawn on are the relationships with the other Sounds Australias around the world, so the other export bodies, and really looking at collaborative projects that we can do with them. So I'll stop there because I could just forever, but yeah.
I know. So Katie, can you talk about firstly your position and the VMDO, and also kind of how you've changed and your business has changed to deal with the situation that we're in at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So the Victorian Music Development Office is a fairly new project. I say project because we sit within our state music peak body, which is Music Victoria, and the VMDO came about to further support music businesses working in the state of Victoria and essentially assist them to do business better. So, I mean, what we do in the VMDO is specific projects to, help them discover new revenue streams, help them connect better with international music communities, which, involved a bit of inbound and outbound delegations, pre-COVID, but we've had to change up the way we do things this year. We support research projects, we do sort of a whole bunch of regular events to connect industry. One of the things that we've done quite quickly, which a lot of businesses and a lot of support organisations for the music industry have done, have been to convert our deliverings to online. So we run a monthly networking event, which was in person, up until February this year, and then in March we changed it to an online event. And one of the key differences with that event is the focus is around networking. So we've used, the wonderful tool that is Zoom that everyone uses daily to use their breakout room function. So we give our audience a chance to kind of break out in casual rooms before and after the topic for that session, which essentially it's still a really casual way of connecting, but and building on something that Millie said, is a lot of what we do is really to support businesses to do what they do best and try to, I suppose, facilitate new ways of connecting, bring new ideas to the fore for them to build on, and let the market, do what the market does best, and just support them with the tools that help them.
Awesome. And Sarah, so you're working for a company called Gig Life Pro in Asia. So you're dealing a lot with the Asian music communities, but also This Much Talent. You're doing publicity for a lot of Australian artists here. Can you talk about how your business has changed and how things has changed for you in the last 6 months, say?
Yeah. Firstly, I want to start with saying how amazing both Sounds Australia and VMDO are. Having been on both sides of working in management and still doing publicity. You know, I've attended Sounds Australia events overseas, which were incredible opportunities for me to network with people, and also attended a bunch of VMDO events as well online, their networking events, and also some of their workshops, which have been incredible, things to do with mental health and a whole bunch of different stuff. So we're very, very lucky in Australia to have both of those companies, and we're very lucky with the government support we get. As you said, Chrissie, I do work a lot across Asia, and having conversations with people every week. There's so many countries and people that are so unsupported in the music industry. So we are incredibly lucky. So for me with Gig Life Pro, I guess it's quite similar to what Sounds Australia do, and also a little bit of what VMDO do. We do networking events across Asia. We noticed that across Asia, a lot of people are quite shy and people weren't really connecting with each other. We noticed that there were a lot of tours happening and people were coming into one country but not going to another country. So we decided we should start connecting some of the different promoters from different regions. Also, each region is quite different. So going and touring in Asia, you're not just going to Asia. You know, China's completely different to South Korea. South Korea is completely different to India. India is completely different to Indonesia, and then Thailand. They all use different streaming services. For instance, you know, Vietnam only got Spotify like 2 years ago. People don't use really Spotify in Thailand. They use Joox, and then Spotify doesn't even exist in South Korea and probably never will. So you have to be really clever, I guess, about your strategy when you're touring through Asia. For This Much Talent, I run a PR and marketing agency, and I work predominantly with independent artists. And I got my PR start actually with Chrissie Vincent, so I learnt from the best. So yeah.
But can you tell us how working with artists at the moment and doing PR for artists at the moment has changed for you? And you mentioned something about Angie McMahon. Was it Angie?
Yes. Yeah. It's actually been an interesting year. From, March, I actually was working on a small festival, a little regional festival that I work on every year, which got cancelled the week before. So that was a bit of a bang start to COVID, where I think I remember spending the first 2 weeks literally just on the telephone with people going, what do I do? And I'm like, I don't know, actually, because I've never been through this either. So let's just you'd have to keep reassessing things every day. But I remember with the little festival Meadow, I was in the Philippines, and COVID was hitting at exactly the same time as it was hitting Melbourne or Australia. And everyone's like, you've got to get out, you might get stuck here. And I remember calling the festival director and being like, dude, what's going on in Australia? Have you spoken to, the local council? What's going on? And then within a week from that, they'd cut down no outdoor events with over 500 people. So then he was just like, what do we do? Do we still go ahead? And then by the next week for that, everything had been cancelled. It was literally like, you can't have anything. So he had to work really hard, obviously, to go back to booking agents and then try and, negotiate either not paying fees or getting deposits back, or maybe moving some of the artists to 2021. And then with the artists that I work with on PR, we'd already announced one artist, Nat Beza. We'd already announced her album. She had 2 tours, one for a single and one for her album a bit later, already locked in. Obviously, both of those got cancelled. She was really clever and turned hers quite quickly onto online ones. And for her record release, she did a record store tour where she played, the Instagram thing on live, at I think there was one in Wollongong, one in Sydney, and then the Melbourne one actually in between lockdowns. So we've actually been in lockdown since the end of March, and then we had 3 weeks where we could kind of go back out into the real world. Her album kind of hit at that time, and she managed to actually go into Rocksteady Records in Melbourne and play live. So her and her band could actually go in and play live. Although there was no audience there, they could still broadcast it, but at least they could do the actual full band thing. So for her, it was really interesting. But the one thing that I did notice, and it has been a bit of a bonus, it's been a good year for emerging artists in Australia, because there's no international artists coming in. There's no big festivals, which the radio stations would normally be supporting, and media. it's opened up a lot more space for emerging artists to actually get noticed by the journalists and the radio stations and get played. And also, again, being a supportive country as we are, everyone wanted to support the local artists. So, The Guardian, I think, which you had something to do with too, Millie, Sounds Australia, were doing like an all-Australian playlist, which is huge for an Australian artist to get on that. And, radio stations, I know 4ZZZ in Brisbane were just doing, we're only going to add Australian music, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like, especially for Triple J too, it definitely opened up a few more slots for local artists to get added to rotation on their station as well.
That is great. So great to hear. So, apart from jumping online and going, okay, we're going to be on Zoom, which we're all loving, doing the isolate and those type of things, what other ways would artists be able to get their music out there or to promote themselves, especially internationally? There's not really any other way, is there? Or can you think of any? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the projects that we've seen evolve that just has taken a life of its own that I don't think any of us thought it could be. I mentioned it briefly. It's called Global Music Match, and I really do encourage everyone, if they get a chance and have hours to kill, to log into globalmusicmatch.com. And what it is we have 96 artists from 14 different countries. They've all been put into 16 teams. Each team has 6 artists. They've all been assigned a coach, and the international coaches are the programming directors of the Woodford Festival, of Port Fairy Festival, of the Philadelphia Festival, programmers for Glastonbury. So there's really key industry that are managing the teams. And then over the course of 6 weeks, each of the acts is introduced to a new territory via the social media platform of their other artists. So every act's going into 5 new territories, and the way that they're being presented, and it really was left up to the artists. It's all been artist-driven. And, we thought that they'd do some interview chats with each other and sort of play a video. What they're doing now is crazy. There's collaborations with 9 of them on at the same time, having reworked and arranged each other's music. There's Thai artists being introduced through a cooking show. There's people have created game shows. People have, I think you give artists the freedom to be artists, and they will amaze and impress you every single time. And I think the really special thing about Global Music Match, one of the things I saw today is a team challenged the rest of their team to be kind. So I've just seen 6 trees have been planted by one of the artists on behalf of each of their teammates. So it's really going far beyond the realms of music. It's about this people-to-people connection. And I think more than ever, the artists are thriving that. They're able to, when there's no travel, they can't export, they can still stay connected, they can collaborate. They're really part of something bigger, and it's bigger than them, and they can identify with, this is universal. This isn't just unique to Australia. This is everyone, everywhere, and that's been really special. There's an inherent skills development and education component to it. Certainly with regards to social media, I think most of us didn't know what cross-posting was or what whitelisting was or, all these other terms and fandangled buzzwords, but they've had to really look at their engagement with their fans and their audience in a really different way. And it's really been to have fun. So there's been a little over 3,000 pieces of new content created across Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube and Facebook. But just for us, it's just that intangible collaborations. I think as soon as those borders open, they're all going to go to each other's countries. They're all going to tour with each other. And so that's been really something I just don't think we ever would have spent the time doing had we not had this COVID pressure. So I guess that's a positive. Yeah.
I agree with that. Actually, it's given a lot more international artists and artists a chance to collaborate together, because normally they'd be so busy. where they're at home now, so it's giving people an opportunity. Like for us at Gig Life Pro, we've been running weekly networking events. So we, as soon as COVID hit as well, because we used to do physical events, obviously everyone just went, well, we'd have to move online. And again, thanks Zoom. And so we invite, Chrissie, you've been on one of these, we invite 20 people each week from all over the world to come and just talk about what they're working on, the projects that they're working on. And last week, from one of the calls, one of our friends in India has started collaborating with Def Jam in Asia. So lots of really good things are coming out of it because we wanted to make sure that people were still connecting with each other and pushing the
that's awesome.
side. Yeah.
And I think one of the things we've been really mindful of, you know, certainly the way the VMDO has been set up and for Sounds Australia, I mean, we're transactional. We want outcomes. We want Australian artists to succeed and do well, and we want to facilitate, you know, a really financial revenue streams for these artists. What we're mindful of is in this environment, that's almost off the table. You know, a lot of the key industry that we would be partnering with, particularly in the Alive arena, have been furloughed. They've been made redundant. They don't know what their future looks like. And we're all opening at different stages. So I think taking that real business to business element out for now and just connecting people and looking at the human elements of collaboration, I think is actually bringing a really different optic to the way people are engaging. And in some ways, I'd like to hope that that becomes a real foundation and bedrock as to future, you know, dealings as well. Because, you know, you can get a little bit over that whole, we're here to sell, we're here to sell. So I think it's sort of tempered that, which has been good.
Katie, you're working more with business to business and looking after the music businesses in Victoria. Can you talk a little bit more about how they're surviving? There's a couple of questions on here as well. So, yeah, can you talk about how the music businesses in Victoria in particular are surviving?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it as you mentioned before, Chrissie, it has been very challenging in Melbourne and Victoria. Our lockdown has been extended, and I've read various conversations online, particularly over the past week, that even the rest of Australia probably can't quite grasp, what we've been through in Melbourne. And I mean, I think that, those projects for artists have been absolutely incredible and as Millie mentioned, just really confidence boosting and really centered around connection, which has been really key. We've been thinking about the importance for businesses to have those opportunities as well, because they sit behind the artists and, are really driving their careers forward and they're, I think across the world, everyone's mental health has taken a hit to various degrees. So one thing we did recently, which I think more than anything, the connection was just tremendous and it really sort of shook everyone's day-to-day up, was we brought a delegation of 30 live music professionals to a conference called the Interactive Festival Forum, which is in the UK, and it usually takes place in London each year in September, and it's usually a very much like a buyer to seller type conference from what I gather. I've never been myself, but lots of really prominent booking agents across predominantly Europe and UK connecting with festival bookers from that region as well. And they converted their conference to online, so we had an opportunity to support a whole bunch of Victorians to attend that conference and take part in their, take part in the live chat for the panels, take part in their speed meetings, all of that kind of thing, and that was really unique. That that way of connecting online, and I think it was. I mean, for me and for most of the group, their first opportunity to take part in a virtual conference. And, there's some upsides and some downsides to that. You've got, this huge amount of access to these incredible professionals from all over the world that, you know, that you would have. I think that the fee was £50 to pay to attend that conference, so relatively, you know, low cost to attend. And, you know, you've got access to that kind of high-end industry conversations that are happening. And, you know, also there was some incredible sort of speed meeting opportunities and connections made there. But equally, you know, it doesn't replace that face-to-face connection that you get when you do you commit to going to a conference, you know, across the world. But it was interesting because I think that it's definitely had an impact on the way that people think about the way that they're going to do business in future. And perhaps, you know, they will look at these virtual opportunities and sort of weigh up, you know, which ones they can attend in person when, you know, the borders are reopening, and which ones maybe they can get a lot of value from participating online, like a conference like this. So that was, I think that was really exciting. And, you know, we've got our main Australian music conference coming up later this month, Big Sound. And I'm really excited to see the connections that are made, particularly, from across Australia, but internationally as well, through that kind of online setting. Yeah.
I actually watched IndieCon yesterday, and I had it on one screen and I was getting so much info just in the background while I was working away, and it was great. So instead of me, you know, I wouldn't have gone to Adelaide in South Australia to attend it, but was able to join it online, which was awesome. Anyway, like I said before, we are really lucky with regard to government support. You know, I realise that a lot of other countries don't get that support, and their governments really don't see the music and entertainment industry as having an economic or cultural impact. So they've not planned for any kind of support in COVID recovery or in their response to COVID at all. So I wanted to talk about, because I thought that it was really important for our friends in America to understand the types of support that we get from our government. So I know that you guys, both Millie and Katie, can talk about the grants that both your organisations have receive and rely on. So Katie, do you want to go for it? For
Sure.
The VMDO and
yeah, sure, music, I can start. I'll probably mainly talk about Victoria, but also give everyone a bit of an insight as to the support we receive here. My organisation of the VMDO is all state government funded, and we've been supported for 2 years, and hopefully, we'll be able to exist ongoing to help support the industry. But in Victoria, the state government has committed $90 million across creative industries, and around a bit over $19 million of that has been specifically attributed to music industry announcements, and that's sort of in a process of being rolled out across various grant programs. We've had one major grant program recently that was $15 million for live music venues, and specifically around keeping them alive and going towards their operational costs. And that was an opportunity that we hadn't seen before in Victoria, and over 100 venues in Melbourne and across regional Victoria have been announced as recipients for that particular grant program. We've also had a few various music industry specific grant programs rolled out over the last few months. Most recently, we have a new $3 million music industry recovery program, which is all around assisting businesses and artists right across the industry to support themselves as we work through, these reopening phases as we're going through in Australia. developing new work, identifying new ways of working, upskilling. So that and that's been that grant round is open at the moment, but it's definitely we've sort of seen rollouts across the last few months of a range of different initiatives to support the Victorian music industry. But I'll probably let Millie talk more about sort of federal support.
Yeah, and look, I do acknowledge that we are in a really fortunate position. I started keeping a track and a list of what support was happening, and without sounding flippant at all, there was just so much come 6 months in, we just stopped. So ultimately now every state government in some capacity, whether it's through a wider overall state business initiative that music can apply through and within, has all been announced now for pretty much each individual state and territory. There's been considerable repurposing with our major arts funding body. The Australian Council for the Arts came out really early to look at all their existing programs and reposition them as COVID relief. So whether that was immediate emergency, like keep people afloat type opportunities, through to how do you look to recover and rebuild, through to how do you innovate and bring your projects online. So multiple tiers coming from the Australian Council, and their advocacy hasn't stopped and are continuing to look for more funding. There's definitely been a very, I wouldn't say strategic, because I think everything that's happened has been so rushed, but where we've been incredibly fortunate is that every state has a music industry association. There are trade organisations across the publishers, across the managers, across the PROs, the major labels, the independent labels. You know, there's more acronyms and trade bodies that you can throw a stick at. And I think very, very early on, I think the first 2.5 months, all I was involved with before these Sounds Australia projects was advocacy, and was combined advocacy. So really talking to the federal government about the needs of a music package specifically. So we were able to get that up. It ended up being a $250 million package, and it sat across multiple areas. So $75 million was for competitively assessed grants for new projects. $90 million of it was in loans. There was $35 million for existing organisations. I'm trying to think of some of the other areas. Look, I think you're always going to need more and want more. I don't think it's ever a stopgap, and I do believe that there's some harrowing statistics with respect to where businesses are at and how many are actually going to last the next, 3 months. So I don't want to by any means suggest it's a job done, but I do feel like, we have been heard and we have been supported in a way. One of the things, and I think you may address this, Chrissie, was, is the government doing enough, and how is music funded in terms of that conversation? And one of the things that became really apparent is that when the airlines went to pitch to government, and everyone's going cap in hand for sector-specific, packages, no one from the airlines needs to tell the government what an airline does. How's an airline helpful? What does it look like? Same thing with sporting codes. We're a sporting nation, and sport's always supported and funded. But basically they need to just say there's X amount of teams, X amount of players, we have broadcast rights, we have people attending stadiums. This is the kind of package. And so when it comes to advocating for music, we are the most difficult industry to explain to government at all levels. Mm-hmm. So you go in, and you might go in with the arts. So we're in there with performing arts and visual and book and literature, and we're one of the many in the arts that needs funding. And then we look at it and we go, well, actually we are music of ourselves, and music has 2 copyrights, and those copyrights are supported by labels and publishers, and this is what they do. But really, if you want to get in touch with the artist, which is a small business, they're run by managers, and managers run their own small business, but they have no say in the copyright. And as music, we work a lot with film and television, because there's composers and original scores, and there's people working there. So we might have our advocacy efforts in that regard in terms of quotas. And then we look at it and go, none of that's touched the live side of the music industry. So with the live side, you've got venues and you've got stadiums and you've got festivals and you've got crew and you've got tour managers, security. Like, it goes on and on and on. And if you try and articulate that in one punchy 25-word sentence as to how we need help, that's hard. So I know that was just a mouthful, but I'm trying to say this is how music, contemporary music, needs to position itself within government. And are we just part of the arts? I think there's a real opportunity for conversations across all portfolios, from small business to digital trade and export to education and health. And, you know, so I think there's conversations to be had there. But as Katie said, there is support coming in. And for that, we are truly grateful and extremely lucky.
Yeah. Sarah, do you know, with your dealings with Asia, are any other countries in Asia getting support at all for their creative industries?
Yeah, look, Singapore does, South Korea does, Malaysia to some extent, although I know that there's money, but people are having difficulty getting it. I've got a friend that owns a venue over there that's just having such a difficult time. You know, there's a lot of corrupt governments in Asia as well, and that makes things really difficult. India, absolutely no support. Obviously, Bollywood is still the number one thing there and the only thing that, you know, is considered, you know, as arts or music. But yeah, my friend that runs a venue in Kuala Lumpur, like, he spent a night in jail because he got shut down. It's all really unclear. You know, they say one thing and then people do it, and then the police come in and shut them down or fine them. And then for them to do particular reports, it costs like a lot of money, and then they can't access the funding that's being given to places like Chandana and stuff like that. So, you know, for us, it's very clear here what needs to be done. The government get the money, the grants come up on a website, and it's very clear. Across Asia, things aren't clear. Although I look in South Korea, it's really good. I'm actually working on a digital tour at the moment, actually, with Dave from the Tivoli in Brisbane and Patrick Connor, who works on MUCON and another festival called Busan Rock Festival in South Korea. And COCA, which is one of their funding bodies over there, had given them money to do. They were meant to be coming to Big Sound to physically play. And because obviously it's not happening, it got turned into a digital tour. So they're actually still coming, and COCA still funded it. So we're working on a tour where they're doing Isolate, they're doing Big Sound, they're doing Open Season at the Tivoli, and we're looking at a couple of little launch shows again with record stores online. And that's to help them to start building their audience over here for them to hopefully maybe come back next year. And it'll look pretty good for COCA funding them to come back physically next year as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Chrissie, I'm wondering if it's possible to share. I know the States is in a really different position altogether. There is considerable support across the AU and other and through the European Commission. I'm going to just post two links that I think people might want to take a look at. One is WIN. So the Worldwide Entertainment Network have got this incredible COVID map. And so you can go in and break it down by region, click through, and it'll show you the different support that each territory is. It seems relatively current. I had a look at it recently and relatively live. And the other one that covers most of the announcements is IQ Mag, Index Mag. So I think those two are really good. If people are looking at best practice models, I mean, again, when it first started, I was writing and keeping notes on all the announcements, and what we were seeing coming out of Germany, out of France, out of New Zealand, out of Belgium was phenomenal. We were really able to use those in our advocacy conversations within Australia, but then it sort of just kept coming and coming and coming, and all different kinds of packages. So there's two links there that people may want to have a look at to see what's around.
So I might leave it. We might, if there are any questions, because we're going to have to wrap up soon. But also, just how do you see, next year, 2021, panning out? It's really hard to say because we don't know where we're going to be. But is it going to be more of the same from our end and getting our music out there? you know, or what do you think? It's hard to say, really.
Look, I feel like, and certainly we understand that on the export front, we're the last piece of this puzzle. You know, we need to look at Australia. I think we're in a really good position here in terms of things starting to open up. And in a lot of ways that the focus on Australian artists is going to really help in that regard. I think it's going to take a long time internationally. I think a lot of the international events are going to be, if not virtual in 2021, they will be hybrids. And I think some of them will never go back to the way they've operated. So I think that's something to look at. And I think it's also opening, and it's become incredibly apparent that there are fundamental things that did need to change within our industry. And I think we've had an opportunity to really look at some of those now. So I'd like to think those don't come. You know, there's a whole lot of things we should be leaving behind. And I think, look, if I had a crystal ball and could tell you, it'd be amazing. But this is changing week by week. Yeah. Like, literally things we think we're doing, we're not. As I say to my team pretty much daily, they must be so bored of me. What we're doing now is R&D. Everything we're trying, that we're going through and that we're looking at, this is all just practice to see what it's going to work, what will stick, what will not. You know, we had 10 years to get our program where it was, and this is now, you know, you've had 3 months to try and create something entirely new. So take a deep breath and, you know, let's go. So, I don't know the answer.
Yeah. Well said, Millie. I mean, Australia is in an interesting position because we are incredibly excited about the focus on local industry and local artists, and, you know, perhaps that being sort of an emerging or sort of a focused narrative for 2021. But we are still going to have a lot of challenges without, you know, having internationals coming into Australia. You know, that international tours has a huge effect on the music industry ecosystem across our country, you know, and supports the way that, you know, all the related businesses work, you know, all the production and, you know, event businesses, and, you know, and how that feeds into their work and keeps them alive. So hopefully we'll be in a position where we are having more live music events in a COVID-safe way, as they say, but it is going to be certainly challenging to navigate, you know, the next year before we return to, you know, a state where we can get that, you know, international tourism and, you know, international artists coming back into our country.
Sarah, what do you think? Do you think were some things that we really probably should be leaving behind and continuing?
So many things.
Yeah.
I think it's been a really good opportunity for a lot of people, personally for me, because, you know, I've constantly felt like I was chasing my tail, and, you know, you're always expected to be at places. This is the first time that I've had 9 months where I haven't had to be anywhere. Like, I've worked in the music industry my whole life, and one of the big pressures is that, you know, you always feel like you have to be at things. You've got to be seen, you've got to be out, you've got to be, you know, and now it's just like, it was so nice. I mean, I know it's awful, but it's been so nice to just like not have to be anywhere, but still be doing amazing business. And, you know, I think there's definitely some good stories coming out. There's definitely some great stuff happening. Like, I know there's 6,000, 7,000 capacity events happening in Thailand right now. They're doing stadium gigs in Taiwan. Like, they closed their borders really quick. WA, they're doing like big shows again. People are touring WA, which is like amazing. So, you know, it's giving people like a bit of a chance to take a step back and I guess hone their skills for artists as well, and actually take that time to breathe. I know you mentioned Angie earlier. For her, she was meant to be on tour most of this year internationally. That kind of stopped. So it gave her, she was so busy for the last 3 years anyway, it gave her a chance to take a step back. Charlotte, her manager, to take a deep breath and like, you know, really kind of start to plan things. And for them, they ended up recording, Angie's album came out a year ago, and they did some piano versions of that, which they recorded and sold tickets to online for a show. And then from that too, Angie's now released an EP on vinyl. So that was a good pivot for them. So they did the concert, sold tickets, and now we're actually about to rescreen the concert again. And it's available for 24 hours all around the world. So there are definitely still things people can do. And the other thing that Angie's done with this one is she's brought an international artist on to support her for this as well. So there's ways. The other thing is, I think the big thing next year is going to be mixed reality. I actually watched a mixed reality performance last week, an artist from Singapore, where he was live, but everything else was like kind of virtual reality. And it was really cool. I actually really enjoyed it. So although, for me, I definitely miss gigs. Like I miss being out with my friends, and live music is a big part of me. I have honestly had a very hard time connecting with stuff online, but it's the new norm, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, ladies. We don't have any questions from our audience, but I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us this morning in Australia. So
Very early.
7 a.m. we started in Australia. But thanks so much. And look, I don't know what else to say. Thank you for joining us. It was
Thanks,
great conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Chrissie.
Thank you.
Good luck with your conference, the rest of the event.